Hello, I'm Logan Loya,
And I'm Brianna Sheets.
and you're listening to Terror Talk. So, um, since you've been on, we talked about uh, horror movies to kind of get started on. And can you tell me any of like the movies you started watching or have watched, and how if you've grown more into horror?
Well, we watched Hereditary,
Hmm.
and it definitely did. Because I think what's cool about Hereditary is that even after you finish it, there's still, more to notice.
Hmm.
You know? Like, there's so many things in the movie where I was like, that was weird. But then afterwards, I was like, oh,
Yeah,
that's a really cool detail.
and then there's a lot of Easter eggs in that movie. Like, there's the symbol of the demon in the movie Payman. There's
Mhm.
that symbol's everywhere in that movie
Yeah.
if you pay close attention.
I think one of my favorite little, moments in the show is how when the mom is freaking out on the son over dinner and she says oh, you always have that sneer on your face, but we can see his face and he's not sneering and he never had, but then when he's crashing out in the classroom and he looks in the glass, he has that sneer on his face and we realize that's what she's been seeing and not his actual face. That was really cool.
Yeah, and then she gives him like a death stare.
And that's the evil little
That-
gremlin face.
for no
Why
reason.
did she look like that? He looked so sad in that scene and she's raging out. I'm like, oh my god.
But
But at the same time, it's neither of them are in the wrong. That's
no,
what's also really cool is it's morally gray.
yeah, because there's nobody in the wrong, and then there's nobody in the right.
Yeah.
And and I can see where she's coming from because he kind of
Decapitated her only daughter.
and then like just
Laid
left her
there.
in the car.
Just laid there. I mean, I get it because he was in a lot of shock.
Yeah.
But, that's crazy.
Mm.
I also think I would have crashed out if, my daughter was actually beheaded.
And just chilling
then
in the backseat of your car.
Chilling in the backseat of my car and my son's just laying there with a 1,000-yard stare. I'd be like, yeah, I think I'm gonna crash out a little bit. I
Poor,
crashed out a lot bit, actually.
that poor father.
That poor he did nothing wrong the entire film, and then he was the first of the remaining 3 to die. And I was like, come on, Steve ain't do nothing.
Steve didn't do anything.
Steve did
He was
absolutely
so
nothing.
supportive of his wife and his son, and then like towards more of the mother
Being ill, mentally ill.
yeah, just freaking out over everything. He's just like, I don't want to do this no more.
He was like, I just want to get you some help. It's okay, we can get through this. And then he lights on fire.
Yep.
And he actually lights on fire. That's insane. You couldn't have given him a nicer death. Steve was nice. Give him a nicer death instead of actually burning alive in front of his wife. That's
Yeah.
crazy.
Yeah, that movie is a messed up movie.
The shots are really good though.
Yeah, the cinematography in that movie is
Cinematography.
great.
That's one thing I really like about horror is that it has really, really good cinematography.
Mm.
I think when I think of really good cinematography, I think of, have you seen the short horror film Vesuvius?
I don't think I've seen it yet, but I know a lot of horror shorts can get in some really good shots.
Yeah. Vesuvius is it has it's I think it's Thai, so it's the Thai version of Mother Mary, but he has Mother Mary telling him to do these things and then later on you realize she's a demon.
Mm.
But the shots have a lot of these crazy religious undertones where it makes you realize that she's making him almost feel like he's Jesus. There's this one shot where he's walking up the stairs and on the top ledge of the stairs there's a picture of Jesus and he stops and he turns his head and the picture of Jesus perfectly frames his face to show that even though he was about to do something terrible, I won't say what it is because that's part of the film, but it was really, really good. And another shot where he walks into a room and all the statues of Mary and Jesus in the background are in shadow, but he's in the moonlight.
Yeah.
It's really, really cool.
And then whenever I think of horror shorts, my mind goes to the YouTube channel Crypt TV because they have made some phenomenal horror shorts. They have some really easily recognizable monsters. The Looksee is probably their most popular, and he's this monster, it doesn't really go into what he is, but so he could be a demon or just an entity. I don't know what he is, but whenever somebody is like in so much grief, like if they can't let it go, the Luxie will come and take a piece of them. And like he has like this rhyme that's like, if you yourself cannot release, then he will come to take a piece.
Jesus.
And it's such a wild show because there's multiple episodes and there's 2 seasons. Patiently waiting for season 3.
I'm always really impressed when like horror shows have, or like horror shorts, especially on like YouTube, when they have like really good monsters. Cause like horror makeup's hard.
Yeah.
But they just like crack it out in like a 10-minute little movie, and I'm like, oh my god.
Yeah.
And I know it took hours in makeup too for like such a short movie.
Yeah, and there's some points I can see where they use CGI, and it doesn't look great, but I mean, you're not gonna have like
Marvel.
fabulous like Marvel size CGI in like a short 10-minute film.
Yeah.
But they mostly use practical effects, which I love, because I've talked about practical effects so much on this show. But it's such a great way to actually put in the fear, and it has the right, it sets the tone, so like you can see what you're scared of or what you're supposed to be scared of, and it genuinely looks terrifying.
I think I love when horror like doesn't need a monster, or like if it does, it's like not necessarily evil, but it's like enough to drive the main character insane. I know there was this one, I cannot remember what it's called, but it was a woman who was like running from this thing. It was like this monster that only she could see, but it had like no eyelids. Yeah, I think so.
I don't think it had eyes in It Follows.
It might not have been that one then, but I know it didn't have eyelids, it didn't have ears, and it couldn't talk, but she was the only one that could see it, so she was trying to gouge her ears out and bleach her eyes. So she broke into somebody's house and like bleached her eyes, stabbed her ears. Person found her and she was like in the hospital, and I know at one point at the end she's looking at it and she doesn't want to see it anymore, but she realizes that the reason it didn't have ears and the reason it had messed up eyes was because it had been like her at one point seeing the monster, so it tried to gouge out his eyes and ears, but then it became the monster.
So yeah, that's not It Follows. But
yeah, it's not It Follows.
That
but
sounds really interesting.
It's really weird at first, but it's really good. It's really good, because it's like it is technically the quote unquote like monster, but it's not evil because it can't help what it's doing.
Yeah. Because
it's not like it's purposely like, oh, I'm here to make this girl gouge her ears and eyes out. It's like, no, I was in that position, but I can't stop it.
Yeah.
That's like the freaky part of horror to me, is like most of the time you literally can't stop it.
Yeah.
Like what was the one, Smile?
Oh yeah.
That would freak me out because you think she wins, but then you realize you literally cannot stop it.
And then like Smile was such a wild movie. And like I didn't think it was going to be too good, because like when it was coming out I was just like, oh, it's a movie called Smile. How good is a horror movie called Smile going to be?
Ronald McDonald.
And it was my favorite horror movie of that year.
Yeah, it was really, really good. And you really did not expect it to be.
And it was such a heavy subject too.
Of like brutal suicide. That was like, I think that was the hardest part of the movie, is you're just watching it and then all of a sudden it's just like people dying and you're like, oh my god, oh my lord.
Yeah, that's.
But also like what I love about a good horror movie is when it makes you really frustrated, because it's so frustrating to see the main character like, you know what she's actually experiencing and you know what she's actually like scared of, but nobody around her believes her and everybody just thinks they're insane, and you're like, it's like frustrating, but you're like, oh, it's okay because she'll pull through at the end and then everything will be fine. She
nope.
she did not do that.
And like Smile 2, like, kind of used the same premise where there was, like, false hope, but, like, you think everything's gonna be fine, and then nope.
Yeah, because I haven't seen Smile 2 yet, but I want to, obviously. 'Cause
Smile 2
Smile 1 was really good.
I like it more than the first one, but, like, premise-wise, it's not better than the first one, because,
Yeah,
like,
that first one's hard to beat.
yeah, and then, it's wild, and they could do a lot more with Smile, but I think the way they ended that movie, if they just end it there, I feel like it would be such a great ending. I mean, like, you definitely want more because it there's kind of a
Little bit of a cliffhanger.
little bit of a, yeah, but it would be wild if they just left it there and
Yeah.
just left everything else to your imagination of how it could continue.
Yeah, because I mean, it feels like one of those things that, like, no matter what the character does, it's never going to stop. So
Mm.
you kind of have an idea of, like, what the next movie could be or what the next movie could be. Because it just feels like it's never going to stop.
Yeah.
That's what I think was so scary about Smile, is that no matter what, you can't prevent it and you can't stop it. Once it's,
Yeah.
like, on you, it's on you.
Well, I mean, there's one way you can prevent you from dying, but it's not gonna stop, is
Yeah.
if you brutally murder
Brutally
somebody in
murder.
front of another person.
Which, like, hey, man, I'm not going to do that. I ain't going to go through all that effort. Sorry.
Because, like, it's wild, because it shows that in Smile 2, but, like, it's such a messed up way, and you have to be really committed to not wanting this on you. I mean, some people can do really horrible things just not to die.
Yeah. And I think also not only the moral thing of, like, knowing you have to brutally kill someone, but the moral thing of knowing you're going to pass it on.
Mm.
And they don't know how to get rid of it. So
Yeah.
you know that if you pass it on, that person's most likely going to brutally, like,
And
you know?
there's no way you can stop it.
Yeah, there's no way other than that.
Yeah.
That's what's
And-
so scary about it.
It's just, it's such a horrible, like, thing to be stuck in.
Yeah. But then, like, once you're stuck in it, like, you have
Yep.
to deal with
Just-
it.
And, like, some other movies that have horrible, like, plots that just don't get any better. I think It Follows did that, because it's another one of, like, it passes on to one person to the next, and I haven't seen it in a while, so I'm not sure if they ended it or if is there a possibility for a second movie. But with horror, there's always a possibility
Yeah.
for a second movie.
They like to keep it going.
Mhm.
I think another, like, short that I like that I think you told me you watched was, I can't remember what it's called, like Ledge or something, or like Fall,
Fall, I think it was.
which I think is another really good example of horror that doesn't need a monster or like a
Mhm.
demon or whatever, because it leaves so many questions of, like, where are they? How'd she get there? How's she gonna get out of it? And it, like, you feel it, like, in your chest, that, like, stomach dropping feeling of
Yeah.
like being in that situation even when you're not.
Mhm.
And that's what makes it so freaky, because you're like, I can't imagine how she's going to get out of this. I just want her to fight. And I think that's
Yeah.
what's really cool about horror, is it activates fight or flight, and you just, like, desperately want to see the person to live, even if you don't have no idea how they're going to, because, you know, that's, like, so a very human thing. It's
Yeah.
like, oh, just fight to live. But yeah, the end of that clip, like, implying, oh no, like, she died, like, she
Yeah.
couldn't get out of it, and it's like, it's so disappointing, but there was no other way it could be. She could not get out of there.
Yeah.
But that's the thing about horror, is that it always makes you hope,
Mhm.
but it's kind of dumb to hope with a horror movie.
Yeah. I feel like, because with slashers, most slashers, the main character, like there's always the final girl because she always triumphs and kills the killer. I mean, does the killer stay dead? No.
No,
But
never.
but she ends it and then she survives. But I feel horror works better if there is no good ending.
Yeah.
If like with Smile, that because you had all of that hope and you're just like, this is the main character, she or him, they're gonna triumph.
Mm.
And then when they don't, you're just left, I don't know, just in a like,
It makes it more real.
yeah.
Cause like, imagine that situation in real life. You're not surviving that.
Yeah.
And it makes me feel a little bit better about myself, but also makes me really sad because I'm like, oh, well, I wouldn't have lived either. So,
Yeah.
but oh gosh, what's it? Escape Room? Was that what it was called? That
Yeah.
one I really really liked. I remember thinking like I watched it too young of an age to watch horror movies, but I
Yeah.
remember watching it and just being like, wow, like I should watch more horror. Like that was really
Yeah.
good. The premise of just like being shoved somewhere with a bunch of people you don't know, and then they're like, okay, you all did bad things and survived when you shouldn't have, so you gotta die now.
Yeah.
That's insane. Especially like a little girl goes through like an airplane crash and survives, and they're like, wow, you're so selfish. You're gonna go
Yeah.
in an escape room. Hey, what? She was like 7.
Yeah.
You're so selfish for a living.
Yeah. How dare you?
How dare you survive?
And it reminds me of like Final Destination, but instead of death doing it, it's just some guy who's just like, hey, I don't like that you lived through that, I'm gonna kill you.
I'm gonna kill you. You're gonna be dead. I wanna. I don't know where to like start with Final Destination almost, because I know obviously you started like the first one,
Mm.
but I don't know, because I've heard a lot of things about all the different Final Destinations of like, oh, this one's really good, but this one sucks really bad. And I'm like, because I know with horror movies, people are
Mhm.
like, sometimes it's better just to not watch one of the movies because it's so bad.
Yeah.
But that's where horror confuses
With
me.
with Final Destination, probably the fourth one.
Start at the fourth one.
No,
Or
don't
don't- or skip
don't
the
watch.
fourth one?
Skip the fourth one. The rest of them are pretty good, and then they have really good a really good premise, and then it sets. I love Final Destination and how they like set up the kills,
Good like choreography for
Yeah.
each kill.
and then it's kind of like how he works. It's kind of like a Rube Goldberg like puzzle, or like one of those. I can't remember what they're called, but like they're multiple things that like it's a very complicated way to like put a ball in a cup,
Yeah.
and like it's kind of like that, but instead of a ball going in a cup, it's somebody dying.
It's eyeball. Somebody's eyeball going in a meat grinder, you know?
Mm. But like they've all have a pretty good story, and then the fourth one doesn't. And then there's the fourth one was made in like 3D, which I don't like when horror movies do 3D, because if you don't want to watch them in 3D, some of the shots look really bad.
Yeah. And I feel like number 4 is like the big red flag for horror movies. Because like horror movie, like a trilogy, usually those are pretty great. I feel like trilogies are pretty great. I feel like when they reach number 4 is when horror movies always start to get greedy.
Yeah, because like after like with Friday the 13th, the first one didn't do too well, but when the second one brought Jason in, that's when it really skyrocketed. And then you had the third one when he finally gets his like iconic hockey mask, and then the fourth one is the death of Jason. And the fourth one is called like the final chapter, and that
It was
was
not.
it was not.
It was not the final chapter.
The fourth one, I think, is where the really good movies in Friday the 13th end,
Yeah.
because and then you go all the way to, I think the last one was either Jason X or Jason Goes to Hell.
All of the above.
And Jason X, Wasn't too bad, but it wasn't great.
Just shouldn't have been a thing.
Yeah. Jay when you have like Jason or the Leprechaun and you put him in space, doesn't work.
I'm sorry. Did
Yeah,
you just say
they put the Leprechaun in
space?
space. And like Jason X is when Jason gets into space.
Like, he shouldn't be up there.
It's wild. And there's some really interesting kills in Jason X. There's one which is probably like the most famous, is when he dips somebody's face in um
Like acid?
no, not acid, but really, I can't remember, dry ice. He-
Ooh.
He puts her face in dry ice, takes it out, and then smashes it on a table. And was a really interesting kill.
But yeah, that's very interesting.
It's very creative. And then like another movie recently that's kind of tried that is Terrifier 3, is where he has this really cold, like, I don't know how he made it. He made it out of like a fire extinguisher, and I'm not exactly sure how he made it, but there's one scene where he froze a certain part of this guy's body and would completely smash it with a hammer.
Ugh.
And it's such a brutal scene.
I've heard about one kill from Terrifier where I was like, oh, that's insane. I don't know how I feel about it.
There's
but
a lot of those in the Terrifier series.
that's what the thing is about really creative kills like that, though, is it's so easy for them to be bad.
Yeah.
It's so easy for them to like feel like a 5-year-old almost came up with them. That's like, well, what if she was running and she tripped on a rock and she hit her face, but then she flew and then it hit her eye, and then they like
Yeah.
keep going.
Yeah.
And it's like really stupid things that would never happen. That's why like creative killers are
Mhm.
like, I don't know, they freak me out because I'm like, is this gonna be like a kill where I'm like, ooh, that was crazy, or is it gonna be like, oh, that was crazy?
I mean, it was crazy, but it was too drawn out. Like,
Yeah.
because in Terrifier 2, there's a bedroom scene, which was one of the most brutal kills in recent horror until Terrifier 3 came out. But, like, it was such a long, drawn out, and it just kept getting more and more insane and messed up. And then, like, the mother of the girl who all that happened to, like, walked in, and somehow the girl was still alive while missing an arm, having her so much skin and just torn off. It's wild.
That's crazy. That's absolutely insane.
It's
Me when I lose my arm and all of my skin,
It-
and I'm still alive.
and like the way he broke and just tore off one of her arms is just wild.
That's just like insane. How do you get to that point where you're like, actually, I'm gonna tear this teenage girl's arm off and probably brutalize, her skin. Maybe I'll rip her face off. Maybe I'll do this. How do you get to that point?
You're just
You just be that guy.
you're just that insane guy over there
Yeah,
who's
you're
just like,
just-
you know what? I'm gonna rip
This
that person's face
This
off.
very chalant guy. He ain't nonchalant. He's chalant, as in like he's too much.
Yeah.
I don't even know. I can't even imagine getting to that point. But at the same time, I ain't him. I'm just not that guy.
Yeah, that's probably a good thing.
Yeah, We'll see.
But I mean, going back to short horror films, you can have horror is another thing where it's great to have short horror films because you can do so much in so little time with horror.
Yeah, with long horror films, they really do have a habit of just like drawing it out.
Yeah.
And with short horror films, I feel like it's easier to do like sequel and a trilogy and a prequel and like without it feeling like, okay, this is too much, because it's not like you had a lot in the first place.
Because like they've done a movie of Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark, which would have been better if it was a short horror series, because which I'm somewhat doing.
Well, it's quite literally called Scary Stories, but
Yeah.
yeah.
And it's just a bunch of short. I don't think any of them will be too long.
Yeah,
we
probably not.
we've only filmed 2, and we'll have. I want the series is gonna have 8.
I have more scripts to revise.
Yeah, and I'm looking forward to having them all done, and I'm saying I think they should start posting about in the summer, maybe I don't know, probably May. May is probably when we'll start having them come out.
Doing the makeup and the gore for the horror movies, I can't tell if it has maybe have a newfound appreciation for people that do really good horror movie looks,
Mm-hmm.
or like a newfound depreciation for people who have a giant budget and still make sucky looks.
Yeah.
Because I feel like the looks I've done have been fairly decent with not great materials.
We've had makeup, toilet paper, and a dream.
We've had cheap makeup.
Yeah, cheap makeup.
Corn syrup blood. And then like one bottle of fake blood that is gone. That is gone now. We'll have to find more of.
We'll need to get more blood. But
it really, now whenever I look at a movie that has a giant budget and the horror makeup is crap, I'm like, dude,
like,
come on.
Especially if
I had toilet paper.
Exactly. And especially if you're using like CGI blood, that's more expensive than buying a bottle of corn syrup, some color dye, and it still looks and feels like real blood.
And it's edible.
And,
sure, tastes real bad, but you won't
horrible.
die if it goes in your mouth. Well, that could also be the fact that it was a week old. Probably shouldn't have put that in your mouth. But
well, I did, and I'm completely fine.
You're completely maybe.
Maybe.
Maybe a few screws loose, but those were loose anyways.
Hey.
So, yeah, whenever I see bad makeup, I'm like, there really isn't an excuse.
Yeah.
This movie had a $10 million budget, and you couldn't put fake blood on. That's a bit much.
Yeah, and then some effects could definitely just. I mean, I haven't worked on like a real movie, so I don't know like how expensive it is or like what kind of budget, because they could have a very low budget because like you have actors and prosthetics or like the CGI.
Yeah.
I know CGI is. Well, I think it's gotten cheaper recently.
Yeah, but I feel like they also focus on having like famous actors when like you should be focusing on telling a good story, not getting like Chris Evans or something like that.
Yeah, not because they try to get. I feel like they try to get like big actors to draw more attention to their film, when they could be instead working on making the project more look better and have more better effects than.
I'd say a better way to get a good audience on your film is to have a good film with good visual and a good story, and not just like a mediocre film because you wanted Pedro Pascal.
Yeah. There's so much, because I know they remade The Strangers with lesser known actors, and I feel like that's how they were able to have so many good, like they had a good set, some really good effects, and it was just they did it well. I mean, it's almost a shot for shot recreation of like the first one, but that's because what they're doing is they're making a trilogy out of The Strangers, which I'm really excited for.
Yeah, that's also something that I think is really cool about horror movies, is that when they're not wasting all their money trying to get a really famous actor, I feel like a lot of horror movies I see, I don't know the actors already.
Yeah.
And those ones I feel like are usually pretty good. Like Smile.
Yeah.
I did not know anybody in that movie.
I recognized about like 2 actors.
Yeah.
But it was such a great movie. And then because if they do really good in that film, it gives new like just a
New talent.
new range of popular actors that can be in more
Yeah.
and be in more bigger projects because a lot of people know their name more.
Yeah. And I mean I love when you get actors with range cuz you have like Jim Carrey.
Oh yeah.
He's really good. I mean, he does comedy, but then, also makes you sob your eyes out. Same with like Adam Sandler, I feel like is really good.
Yeah.
Just a lot of like comedy actors, but it's really interesting seeing horror actors because you have like a whole different range of emotions than you usually do. If you're a comedy actor or a drama actor, you've never had to do display the emotions that you will have to display in horror. That's why it's really cool to like start out with horror because if you can like scream and run and cry for your life and look absolutely horrified, you could probably give a pretty good dramatic monologue.
Yeah, and I know in that kind of range, you had Michael Keaton, who did Beetlejuice, which was a horror comedy, and then when they announced that he was gonna do Batman, a lot of people didn't like it because he was so comedic and
he was
like,
Beetlejuice.
he was Beetlejuice, so they didn't think he could do it. But now Michael Keaton is probably one of the most popular actors
The
for
Batman.
Batman.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was I think was Heath Ledger the Joker that was really liked.
Yeah.
And did he do Joker or Brokeback Mountain first?
I'm not sure. I think he did Brokeback Mountain
Yeah.
first.
And so I think that was probably another actor where it's like, oh, he did this role that was like really emotional and sad and like people were memeing about it even though that movie's heartbreaking.
Yeah.
But I think it's just so interesting to see an actor go from like one end of the spectrum to a complete opposite. And I feel like horror is such a good way to display that. Like it's really good.
And then you have horror comedy
Yeah.
and then scary horror, which
You've like dramatic horror, thrillers.
Yeah.
There's so much you can do with horror.
yeah. And I feel like I feel like a good mix of comedy and horror is like with the Evil Dead series because there's so much you can do.
Mm.
But I think that's it for our time.
It is. I think so.
So, I've been Logan Loya,
I'm Brianna Sheets.
and you've been listening to Terror Talk.